Mi gente, you already know who it is. It's Danny Limelight. And I need all of you to subscribe to According to Woods podcast on Facebook, YouTube, and all other platforms.
What's good, party people? This is According to Woods, and I have the honor and privilege of talking to my friend. He's a former epic fighting champion. He is an undefeated professional mixed martial artist. He is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, teaching out of Excel Jiu Jitsu, MMA, and fitness in Oceanside, California. He is the one, the only, Djavan Coleman. Djavan, what's going on, my man?
Doing good, man. Just getting through my Monday. Get a little break in the middle of my day between the morning session and night sessions, and just come back, chop it up with you, man. See what's been going on.
Yeah, again, thank you for doing this because you are doing so much. I mean, you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu and giving back to the next realm of jiu-jitsu, practitioners in teaching yourself, which is awesome because there aren't a lot of that going on. I mean, I've seen a meme or two that says, oh, well, gyms are like the new speakeasies, so it's like hush hush. So, but jiu-jitsu and all combat sports were a large part of our lives before March of 2020. And, if we can get back to it, cool. If you can't, cool, but always stay ready.
Oh, yeah, most definitely, man. This pandemic's one of the reasons why, I wanted to teach, I wanted to instruct more, be close to the action. And you said it, perfectly. Passing it on to the next generation because I'm already on the wrong side of 30. I mean, I only turned 30 last year, but I know right now time's ticking and doesn't mix well with the pandemic. But what I can do is prepare the next generation. I want to coach eventually when I get out, and just having the black belt around my waist. So, you get that respect. You're able to put the time back into people, and it's dope to see them doing the stuff that you've known how to do forever,
No, 100%. It's it's funny. A lot of people, and I always kind of looked at it. This is why I've kind of gone hard in the paint, whether it be interviews and working shows or whatever, because there was going to probably be a day that I'm not going to be here, and I want my kids to be able to hear and see me doing exactly what I'm passionate about, and whatever this is for them to do that, but obviously because of the last year, mortality, finances are some huge topics that some people never talked about at all. And it's happening more and more prevalently because, again, all of it isn't promised.
It's true, man. Kind of after all this, like, I can't believe it's been a year already. It makes you realize, like, how fortunate we were to have everything go smooth for that long, and crowds can show up and you can fight and just sell tickets. It almost seems like, wow, we were at a point where we could just do it like that.
No, 100%. Which, I mean, obviously, black belt in jiu-jitsu, undefeated professional MMA fighter, and even as an amateur, capturing one of the most premier titles on the amateur scene in the Epic Fighting Championship in San Diego. But how did your start to MMA begin? Was it through jiu-jitsu?
Oh, no. I actually started out wrestling. I started out in like 2004, 2005 when I was a freshman at San Clemente High School, and I was awful at it. I was terrible, but it got me hooked. It was one of those things where you get to fight somebody, that whole spiel, I was kind of like a little bit of a troublemaker, didn't really have a direction, and wrestling kept me straight for a long time. And I had a really bad break my last year of wrestling, my senior year. Just fell one match short of the state tournament, and was sitting there like, that's unfinished business. I don't like that. It was real hard on myself. And my mom got me in the jiu-jitsu gym and the Muay Thai gym. And then it still took another 6 or 7 years for me to be like, okay, I want to fight. I want to do something with this. It was kind of more like a hobby that whole time. And then you move to California, and all of a sudden, it seems like this is the show. This is the place to be. If it was ever going to happen, it's right here,
No, 100%. Now, I mean, you wrestled in high school, right? So you had to know that, MMA existed, right?
Oh, yeah. But that was, I graduated high school in 2009. I think that was the era when it's pretty unrefined still, It was Chuck, it was Rampage, it was Tito, it was Randy, it was a lot of the older school guys. And I think they weren't even on my radar back then. I had like hopes of being a college wrestler and wrestling for the Olympics and being on the world team. I was like single-mindedly on wrestling, despite the fact that I couldn't get to the state tournament. But it was a dream, you know. I wasn't looking at MMA, and then I saw John Jones a couple of years later. I think it was the fight where he was beating up Rashad, and they had their beef.
Yes.
He just went in there and for 5 rounds just kind of owned him, you know. And then I looked back and I saw what he did to Machida and I saw what he did to Shogun. And then I watched pretty much every fight from there on. I'm like, yo, that's possible, because he was so creative. He was doing things nobody'd done. It looked like a video game and got me in the MMA gym wanting to try that too, you know.
Yeah. So I mean, it in terms of your mom putting you into, you know, Muay Thai and those avenues, right? You coming from a wrestling, you know, kind of background and pedigree, was it hard to kind of adjust to a striking discipline versus, you know,
It's still
it's still
it's still hard, man. Up at Quest, Sam and those guys, they got to bully me to get to the Muay side of the gym. I want to do jiu-jitsu. I want to wrestle and stay in my comfort zone. And they keep telling me, hey, did you box? How many times did you box this week? Have you done kickboxing yet? And, you know, still something that to this day I'm fighting with to polish. It's wrestling, you're bent over in the clinch. Muay Thai, you're standing up tall, throwing knees. And I've caught enough knees in the face going back to my old habits, you know. So it's one of those type of things where you have to make adjustments. It's almost like your old learning gets in the way of your new learning sometimes.
no, 1000%. And it's, you know, a lot of parables and parallels that come from combat sports, you know, that you can apply in regular life. That's why, like, a lot of people that are successful, you know, in their regular day, you know, business owners, movie stars, and whatever, they, you know, in a time where they're losing themselves, they find, especially jiu-jitsu, like Demi Lovato is a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, Keanu Reeves does it, and obviously the John Wick movies will tell you, you know, who's it? The Ricky Rocket from, Poison. Ricky Rocket from Poison is like I think he's a brown belt, if not black belt, under John Jock, you know, and it's just like, you know.
You've been seeing it
Like
more. I think I just saw Dave Mustaine get his purple belt the other day. Only Al Bundy's been a black belt forever. You know. You
yeah, 100%.
You could see guys peppered all over the scene. You know.
Yeah, which I mean, that's the thing, you know, that from a personal kind of like the pop culture, you know, they look at like MMA and grappling arts, you know, not just grappling arts, but just combat sports in general as just like this pugilism and whatever, but they don't see the science, don't see the just the gamemanship that happens, you know, to be able to do it well and do it well at a high level. It takes so much care and consideration.
Especially now, especially in 2021, as you know, sophisticated as you know, world-class level MMA is. Like, you can't come in one-dimensional anymore. You can't come in there half-assed. You can't come in there with bad prep. You can't come in there without a team behind you. Like, a really good example is Rodolfo Vieira the other week, who's one of the winningest jiu-jitsu guys you've ever seen, and he ends up getting submitted because he has no striking, because he's so loaded on one side, he hasn't done his work on the rest, you know, at least not to be competent at that level. And, you know, that's telling. That's how the game is now. It does take a lot of prep and time and effort and studying and, you know, experience to really compete at that level.
No, 100%. And I love that you mentioned the Vieira, you know, kind of component. And I will even throw Curtis Blades into it, because he was somebody that, you know, was I went pretty hard in the paint to Razor Blades after he lost, posted a lot of memes, you know, but here's why. This is somebody who was pretty much aghast at the fact that, you know, Brock Lesnar coming from the WWE and pushing DC after DC knocked out Stipe, and was like, where's my title shot? I'm a consummate martial artist, to which Dana White replied, good luck being a consummate martial artist and nothing else, because you'll probably be teaching judo at some strip mall to kids in Colorado, right? Like that's it, you know. And here he is. He got knocked out by all the stuff that Curtis Blades knows and everything like that. Many will say that Derek Lewis is as one-dimensional as it gets, right? And he felt a one-dimensional fighter, right? And
I
now,
know.
what does he have to say for it? We had Shannon Dobson earlier in the card, who is got a lopsided record, 4 wins and 5 losses.
But
But
that upset she
now
pulled.
she's probably right, and she's probably going to be exited from the UFC. But what did she do outside of just being a fighter, right? To kind of, I'm I'm a UFC fighter. How can I parlay this into whatever next phase of my career and life are going to be?
And that's huge. That's like what we were just saying when we were talking about coaching is like, you got this small window to fight, you take real good care of your body. You got a little bit of time, but it's like, stop somewhere. And then what did you do with all that? Did you just fight to say you fought, or did you do that as like a stepping stone to build something else in your life? And
Yeah, and it's a weird one, right? Because like it's probably something that your coach is not going to allow. Like if you get a movie, like, hey, Javon, you have a good look. I want to cast you as a stuntman or an extra or even just a small bit part in a movie, right? And
yeah,
then you got to teach class the same day. What do you do? And maybe your coach will give you grief for doing it. Maybe your boss, if but I mean, it is something that might, I look at like Frank Trigg,
totally.
right? Frank Trigg is a good example. Not only is he refs some of your fights,
Yeah.
but he's a UFC Hall of Famer. He acts in Hollywood, right? I mean,
I
I
didn't
just
even
saw
know
on his
that.
Instagram, yeah, he's just doing everything, right? So he doesn't need combat sports anymore. And again, I'm sure his coaches would have told him, no, Frank, you got to whatever. But like when the wheels fall off, and maybe you can't do it anymore. Look at Alistair Overeem. Look at Andrei Arlovsky, right? Probably the most technical and well versed fighters in the heavyweight division, but they both
And
fell to.
you're getting old,
Hmm?
Olenek too.
Yeah, Olenek too. Oh Jesus,
That
don't.
was bad.
Oh,
That was
that
bad,
was
dude.
rough.
It's like, that's when you're like, you can't fight at this level no more, man. It's too much. They're too young. They're too good. You need to chill now.
No, 100%, 100%. So in terms of like actually, so you're training in Muay Thai, you're doing grappling and what have you. At what point, and obviously seeing John Jones, so at what point do you go, maybe I should try and fight?
For me, man, I
Yeah.
honestly got to put that on Joseph Williams, 100%. Because back in 2015, I'm talking shit to him. I'm helping him get ready for one of his fights back when he was like running around the scene pretty hard. And we had a good sparring session. He's like, "Yeah, you should fight." And me still kind of wanted to be the jiu-jitsu guy. Like I was a blue belt at the time. I was only doing jiu-jitsu tournaments, and I was just doing boxing as a hobby, kind of. He's like, "No, you should fight too." And just to not say no and sound like a wuss, I'm like, "Yeah, I'll go fight too." And he's like, go figure. Yeah, I'll go put in a word to Jason Glaza. Go message him on Instagram or on Messenger and say you want to fight. There's one for CFL October 3rd. And then hit him up. They didn't have a fight for me there. And then Josh Grace had a fight for me on True Form like 2-3 weeks later. And that was my amateur debut. And then you win. You get the winning high. You get the feeling of being Superman for about 15 minutes. You get everybody kissing your ass. And then you're hooked for the rest of your life. And yeah, and I've been fighting steady the last 5 years till the pandemic. But that's how it started. Joe pumped my head up. We trained every day. I love this. I was thinking in my head I didn't want to do nothing else than this, but jiu-jitsu don't make no damn money. MMA kind of sort of does. Kind of sort of doesn't. But wanted to give it a shot. Didn't want to ever be one of those guys that I don't know. It's like you hear him kind of say like derogatory. Don't jiu-jitsu guys shouldn't call their stuff fighting. It's not fighting unless you have hands in there, unless you punch, and you take that or leave it. I'm kind of neutral on it, but at the same time, I don't want to be one of those guys that calls myself a fighter and never threw hands with nobody else. So yeah, I'm glad I did it. Hope I can still keep doing it a little bit longer.
Now you mentioned a name, and you mentioned Jason Galaza. Unfortunately, last week we lost Jason Galaza, and shout out to his friends and family. Our condolences. But I mean, do you have any cool memories of Jason?
I actually do, man. I was fighting Spike Carlisle in 2016. It was at CFL. This was the fight uh, in February, and it was the worst training camp of my life by a long, long, long shot. I was dealing with a breakup. I get kicked out of my house. My coach was keeping me going. I was taking a shower at Planet Fitness. Didn't train for the fight. I was just drinking because I was sad. You know, it was one of those type moments, just total pity party. And they talked some sense into me. They said, "You want to fight this guy or not?" You agreed to it. Hold up to your contract. You're starting your MMA career real bad doing it this way. And we didn't know who Spike was. We had no idea. It was just, this is the second guy to fight. Go fight him. And Nate Murphy, he's a black belt at Hanu. He drove me up, gave me like a little 8-day training camp, the pep talk, this and that. We drove up to Victorville, and then I see Jason over there. And Jason was nothing but nice. He was super cool. I must have looked really haggard because he was like, "I got a hotel for you. When in between this, you have some place to sit." And we were already counting on sleeping in the car and everything like that. And he was nothing but nice the entire time. Asked me like what I could get, put me on his live stream, said, "This is Djavan Coleman. Watch what he's going to do tonight." This and that. You know, made you feel real welcome. I remember I've been at other promotions, and the guy barely talks to you. They kind of just shuffle you along like one of the numbers, especially if you're not one of the guys on the main event or nothing. And I just remember him being super welcoming, super nice, and it was really sad to hear what happened. You know, I was talking with Joe Stevenson at practice a little while ago and hearing a little bit about it, and you're just like, this stuff's crazy, you know?
No, 100%, 100%. Again, we're all kind of dealing with our mortality and looking at it more so now than ever, especially over the last year. You know, it's just a weird one to be in. You know, but also you were in a pretty dark place, and just somebody, you know, kind of reaching in, whether Jason knew it or not. Yeah, didn't know it at all, but just reaching in and your time of darkness, you know, you're like, cool, I'm gonna sleep in my car or whatever, and like to have a hotel, like that's amazing.
But it's one of them things where it's like, it's kind of like a cliched saying, but like, don't really 100% remember what they said, but you remember how somebody made you feel. And I remember, coming in there kind of scraggly, coming in there kind of worn down, and then you just got a dude that like believes in you, kind of makes you feel like you're an athlete, like you're famous when you kind of been feeling like a bum like the last couple of days or so. And I definitely got that feeling from them, you know?
No, 100%. So, I mean, was that the first fight?
The first fight?
Like, yeah, was that your first fight at CFL, or what was your first fight?
That's the only time I ever fought at CFL. I fought at CFL,
Really?
Epic, Spar Star, True Form, Tough Enough, and a couple other ones. A couple nightclubs.
Which is pretty much like the tippy top in terms of promotions, you know, amateur promotions. But I mean, a lot of the production, it feels like a professional deal. When you know, CFL has a professional setup, Spar Star, Epic, they all have professional setups. So it's almost no different aside from the pay thing.
It feels really cool. They do it up, all the lights, the names, the presentation, how they're streaming it now. Like, yeah, you feel like a big deal while you're out there. It feels good. It's cool.
No, 100%. So after that first that fight at CFL, and at what point? Because you were like, I didn't know who Spike Carlisle was, right? And now obviously you fought Johnny Souza before, right? Back in 2015. Yeah, that's a really good one, right? But then you were saying like you didn't know who Spike Carlisle was at the time. So at what point did you know like, oh, he's something. He's somebody.
But the way he hit me, man, like I still remember. I don't think he connected clean, but the glancing blows made like the whole cage go black, and then you come to and you're like, damn, I can't take too many more of those. I'm gonna go to sleep if like one more of these hits me. Like you could feel it in the aggression and the power. Like, you know, he's a stud. He's an athlete, and you know when you fight somebody, you're following them, you're watching them. You're seeing their trajectory of their career, and he got with the right people. I seen him at Kings. I seen him at Training Lab. You hear nothing but good stuff about him. You hear that he's a dog and he works super hard, and you can see that progression where 1 year we're fighting and 4 or 5 years later you're up in the UFC. Like, dude did his thing. But for me, you know, it was just like, I guess somebody talking to me saying, dude, you've been more or less in martial arts since 2004. You have 15 years of experience on and off, dude. Start getting serious, putting the work into that, and see where it can take you, and just keep taking fights, staying active, you know? And, my goal is always try to get 4 a year and see if I can build from there, see if I can test myself. And if I get my ass kicked all 4 of them, I'll probably be out there. I probably won't be fighting no more, you know? But so far.
Well, I mean, I like that you have kind of an exit plan. You know, we kind of figure like, you know, DC wanted to fight, you know, up until 40, but before his 40th birthday, he would be out. Obviously, he took a fight with Stipe, you know, because who wouldn't? Who wouldn't,
Totally,
you
totally.
know, take a world title fight, like, and avenge a loss? Like,
No,
yeah, I mean,
money for
right?
that title
But
fight too, man. It's perfect.
yes, absolutely. So, I mean, but I love that you have an exit plan. If like this doesn't work out and you've kind of made the concession with yourself, because a lot of guys, a lot of gals on the scene don't do it. Like, and we see, like, of course, you want to talk about like Tito Chuck 3 and that debacle, but also look at Clay Guida, right? Clay Guida has pretty much given his
Everything.
entire life to this, but what is Clay Guida gonna look like at 50?
You know, or Diego, or if you've heard about
Di-
Spencer Fisher recently, how he can't remember his kid's name and stuff. Like those are all cautionary tales.
yeah,
I remember when I'm younger, I was watching Ali fighting one of the Spinks brothers. I can't remember which one, but Ali was already out the door, and the dude handed him a beating till he put him down, and it's just like, oh man, that dude used to be so good. I don't ever want like people to say that about me. And worse than that, it's not basketball. You know, it's not like, okay, we're going to play basketball and my knees are going to suffer, my ankles are going to suffer, my feet are going to suffer, what have you. But when it's time to get out the game, you know, I can live relatively intact. When you're fighting, you're giving a piece of yourself. You're taking physical damage. You're getting kicked in the body and the legs and getting your head racked in. And while you're training, your shoulders are getting messed up and your knees and your back. And it's like, at what point do I want to sever that and get to that point where I can live in my 50s, 60s, and 70s at least semi-comfortably? And it's a balancing act, because if you hold too much back, you're never going to be the fighter you want to be. You have to sacrifice some part of yourself to the sport. And then for us, it's how much. Where do you draw the line? And for me, I'm kind of just figuring that out. And my line's not drooling when I'm 40, so it's definitely going to be before then, you know?
no, 100%. And you talked about the quandary, you know, and there's an on top of that, right? It's just like the relevance, like because you hear of like Paige Van Zandt saying like, oh, her bare knuckle, you know, contract was bigger than anything that she got in the UFC, and
Yeah,
in her last UFC fight, she was making more, you know, on Instagram than she was fighting, right? So,
believe it.
but she built that much like anything, right? But there's a quandary that happens there, right? Where, like, do you want to be all in as a fighter, or do you want to explore different avenues and what have you? You know, like if you could, you know, essentially harness your credibility and notoriety from, you know, fighting and launch it into a business or business endeavors and what have you.
Yeah.
Again, this is something that your coaches might not be like okay with it, but I mean, again, there's no question that Conor McGregor has made more money outside of fighting than he has inside. You know,
No doubt.
and he was even the highest paid mixed martial artist of all time. Take Ronda, take Brock, take everybody, John Jones. Conor beats them all in terms of gate revenue.
Yeah, no question. But it's also kind of like striking that you're the highest paid athlete ever, but yeah, you still made more money outside the sport. I mean, like I guess that's relevant in all the other brands. Like I guess probably LeBron makes more money off of his endorsements than his salary. But like what I kind of see is like those guys, they don't have to work no extra jobs. I think I just saw a picture of Liam McGarry in the shipyard doing construction the other day, and I'm like, man, fuck, that dude fought for a title.
Yeah.
Like, geez, they should come on, man. You know,
Mhm.
that's where I'm like, our pay scale needs to go up. Where if you a good fighter, like they got to take care of you a little bit. Just always thought that's crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, you almost kind of have to be a bit like insane, right? To like literally give parts of your body to the sport, sacrifice, like very real sacrifices, and then you know end up not, you know, getting paid pennies on the dollar compared to other athletes that I won't. I guess you could say less physically taxing, especially when it comes to the brain. Yeah,
Yeah.
basketball isn't as physically taxing on your brain. I mean, you could argue football and rugby for sure, you know,
Football,
the
I gotta
contact and
say,
whatever.
maybe a
But
little bit of
again,
football. Definitely
yeah,
like football.
exactly. And the thing about it is, like, I mean, you to look at a football contract, right? Or like even if you're a kicker, right, versus like even the top echelon of who gets paid in, UFC and Bellator,
Oh yeah.
it's like again even still pennies on the dollar.
Pales in comparison, man. And they got one job. They just kick, which don't want to understate that. I'm sure they still put a lot to be world class at that. But, man, oh, man. 10 to win, 10 to show up don't compare to $590,000 to punt and kick a ball. I'm sorry. Like, just off the workload. But it's one of them things. It's what we got into. It's a young business.
Yeah. I mean, imagine.
I was just going to say it's super young.
Oh, no, good.
Football been around since, man, the modern era since 70, and then before that since the 1800s. They had plenty of time to build and gain interest, and now it's like a national thing, whereas we only started the UFC in 93. You know, we still got a long time to grow, and you've seen how far we've come since the Tito and Chuck days even, you know. Been a long time, been a lot of growth.
Which has got to be weird, right? No, 100%. But it's got to be weird in the Jones households, right? Because John Jones, right, his two other older brothers are not just football players, but they both have won a Super Bowl, you know. And again, here's John, who literally gets his ass kicked by the other two, but is argued as the greatest of all time in the sport, but he can't handle his two brothers. One, and then also the paychecks. The two brothers are looking at John, you're the greatest or whatever, but I mean, you make literally a quarter of what I do. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, you're winningest fighter ever. You've dominated everybody in your sport, but I got to think John's probably sitting pretty well off. I think he's making pretty good money right now. I also see him fighting for
pretty good money for
contract, but we'll see.
Oh my goodness, dude! I'm a fan of like people essentially ascending, right? Like you know, when Eddie Alvarez came from Bellator as a former Bellator champion and what have you, and then coming and winning UFC gold, like I'm all in. Like I want that, right? So Izzy's fighting Jan, right? Jan Blachowicz, the light heavyweight title, and then we could have, by year's end, assuming that he beats Jan Blachowicz, well, he's a 2-division champion simultaneously, and him going to fight John, and if John beats Stipe, that would be for the heavyweight title. Would there be any argument if Izzy has his title, beats Jan for the light heavyweight, right? Goes up to heavyweight and beats John.
Damn.
Wouldn't he be the greatest of all time?
You would have to think so, man.
Wouldn't it?
There's obviously a couple things that always go into that. You know, you beat the GOAT way past his prime or whatever people are going to say. But, man, yeah, it'd be hard to argue that. Triple champ in 3 gigantic weight classes. You sometimes might see it when they're like 10 pounds apart. But, man, 85 to 205 is a big gap. And 205 to heavyweight is a way bigger one. It'd be pretty crazy to see. And that said, I really actually don't like that matchup with Jan at all. It almost feels like tailor-made for Izzy.
Really?
I feel like, first of all, they shafted my man Glover. I feel like Teixeira should have got that shot. He 41. He only getting older. I feel like Jan's a middleweight to begin with. He just grew into his size a little bit, but he could actually make that weight class. So the size discrepancy between him and Izzy isn't that much. And just after what I saw him do to Costa, I'm like, oh, they're giving him that fight. They're giving him that so he can be the title, so they can match whatever they need to after that. But hey, Polish power, you know. Dom's one of my teammates kind of by association, and I thought Dom was going to walk over Jan. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Reyes, shout out to Dominic Reyes. I thought that was going to happen, and especially seeing, you know, we talked about the Jones family, but look at the Reyes family in the high desert. They rule everything. Like all of the Reyes brothers, all stud athletes and what have you, and then the younger one, you know, ends up, you know, being in UFC title contention.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows, you know, those athletics, they go a long way, those genes, and it just shows, well, honestly, like where the sport's going with this, you know, where I'm still seeing some of those guys, because I watched, I think maybe like 2-3 years ago, I started like a UFC playback where I started at UFC 1, and I watched every single event on the way up. I'm at like, maybe like mid Anderson Silva era right now. I think one of the most recent ones I watched was like Carlos Condit and Campman, and then before that, I think it was like Rampage and somebody. Anyway, I'm like right around at that point, and you really do see, like, I watch a lot of film study too, how technical the game's gotten, how much it's grown, how much it's progressed, and more than that, just like the old basketball comparison from the 90s, like how much more athletic it is, how much, not only do you have people with better genes for this, but you have specialists, strength conditioning coaches, nutritionists, the recovery people that do cryo, that do all that stuff, that really like invest into your body, where you had dudes back in the day that would be wasted and then go show up to the show and throw hands, and it's a whole different ball game now, you know. You got some real athletes in the sport, and I feel like that's really going to be interesting to see how it grows from here.
Yeah, you know what's weird to me, because like you mentioned in terms of like the pay scale, the NFL and the game of football have been around for at least 100 years, right? And the UFC, which is the premier organization of MMA, they've only been around for close to 30 years, right? And the pay discrepancy. Wouldn't it be weird, right? Because total disclosure, I was driving Uber, before the whole pandemic, and it was the best money that I'd ever made in my life, right? But I knew, Elon Musk was, having, like the cars, the Teslas drive itself, and, they were running test runs on vehicles, 18-wheelers that were unmanned, going from, literally Santa Monica to Florida and whatever. So I knew the time was over, right? And, all of the struggles that, fighters go through, unionizing, all of that jazz, right?
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be crazy that, like, finally where the MMA pay scale catches up, and then the UFC will be just like robots?
Yeah. I mean, you mean like literally, or like who could
be?
Because that'd be crazy. That'd be some other level stuff, man. But I feel like as far as us unionizing, I hope for it. But man, I just feel like the pay scale's so wide, so crazy. Where I think I heard a story a while back where somebody got paid like $250 or something, $250 to win, $250 to show up at Bellator, and then somebody's making damn $300,000 on the card in the main event. And you're like, wow, that's how big a gap this can be. Like you shouldn't have to like negotiate and hustle that hard to get paid what you're worth. But I guess that's the world too, hard to call.
I've even heard I've literally heard fighters pay to be on cards, which is technically against the law. But there's the amateur circuit, much like NCAA and everything like that. But I mean, like pro cards with names.
That's wild.
Fighters would pay to get onto the card.
Because know if you pay and you get your ass kicked, you're not one of the good guys on there, man. Damn. That's brutal.
Yeah. It's weird, so I don't know where it's going to be. And then this is where a lot of people, right, like the pro wrestling and the MMA, like a lot of people keep it separate, but just in my mind, they're more alike, because again, combat Jiu Jitsu and EBI and a Fight to Win, well, if them doing that 100 years ago was called pro wrestling with, Frank Gotch and George Hackenschmidt, so they're similar. They're similar, but 100%, right? So the fact of the matter. No, 100%.
I knew that, like, at some point it was like realistic back in the day, and then it became more like showbiz in like the last 20 or so years. That's crazy.
Yes. Well, it's weird that here's the funny thing about it, right? In terms of like the plight of wrestlers, pro wrestlers, and the plight of MMA fighters, it's almost like the same, right? Because here, there's a certain segment of people, MMA fighters, that want to unionize. Well, there was a gal in the WWE. Her and her husband both worked as wrestlers for the WWE, and they were like, "Oh, you want to unionize? Cool." And they fired her.
Damn.
Kept him, but he's just losing like pretty much every match, like, and this is somebody who also had like a kickboxing background, and he's just getting jobbed out all the time, right?
Like
the same kind of, it is 100%, and the same the same antitrust lawsuit that people are essentially casting on the UFC. Like, if you don't fight, if you piss Dana off, well, you don't fight in the UFC, blah
Yeah.
blah blah. Well, that's antitrust. Well, back in the 1950s, the National Wrestling Alliance, the original NWA, not the guys from Compton,
Yeah.
but the National Wrestling Alliance had the same FBI antitrust lawsuit placed on them because, again, if you didn't get along well with the promoters, they blackballed you. But it was a territory basis. So if this guy in Missouri says, you're blackballed because you pissed him off. Well, you can't work in Florida. You can't work in California, or whatever, because they were all a collective.
They're working together. Yeah. That's shady. There's a lot of the fight game like
Well,
that, man.
we haven't. Is it shady, or is it like we haven't learned anything in literally like how many years? What, 50 to now? Damn near 70 years, and
Doesn't seem
we're
like
still
it. It's
here.
doing the same thing like that, but I gotta feel like even now it's only gonna make it harder too, because it's like now it's supply and demand. Now it's almost like it's monopolized because only so many venues can run because some states are shut down, and you have to go through these places in the states that are running it. It's no crowds, and it's like, oh, it seems tough right now, you know, on top of everything that we've already been dealing with for this long.
No, 1000%. Which, you were somebody who turned pro after your amateur career, and you did it before the pandemic. But I'm seeing a lot of your amateur contemporaries needing to go pro. Yes, of course, they wanted to, maybe win a California state title, like
Sure.
this one here. This guy here, you might know
Pretty good.
it, right? Uh, yeah, there's it.
Thought I got
That's actually Brooke Mayo's.
Nice.
Yeah, that's actually the very
Oh, yeah,
first
you're talking about.
women's bantamweight. Yeah, from Brooke Mayo. She even described it and all that jazz.
Nice.
But that's the thing, right? You here in California, you kind of want to win an amateur title, just like you did at Epic. Then and then go for the California state title, and then essentially, aspire to pro, right? But out of
Yeah.
necessity, because the amateur scene here in California, from literally the top of the state to the bottom, there's nothing going on, as well as the pro cards, right? So
Seriously.
you have a lot of amateur fighters, not just here, but everywhere, that have to go pro out of necessity just to get a fight.
And it sucks too, man, because like I remember, I think, man, after that I got my title, the Epic one, and that one night, I was gonna go pro right after that, and everybody's telling me, dude, you've had 6 fights, and a couple of these have only lasted a minute or 30 seconds. You don't have like the experience, the presence, the confidence. And they pointed out, they're like, look at you, you shoot as soon as like the bell goes off because you don't want to get hit. Like, you need to feel comfortable in there. We want you to get 10, 11, 12 fights before you go pro. And like, I feel for those guys now that are like, okay, you got 2 fights. You hadn't really figured it out. You might have lost one, The other one might have been quick, and now they're already saying either go pro or bust. It's like you're rushing these guys. You're not giving them enough time to grow into the fighter they need to be. Like, it's like it's messing up the process, but it's necessity. It's push come to shove. It's either that or you don't fight at all, We got a guy like that, right?
Absolutely. So, I mean, you met who's like that right now?
Oh, I have a homie, and he's one of my best friends. He's one of my training partners. His name's Nick Myers, and 6'3", 170-pounder. He's really good, but he has 3 fights and not a ton of experience. But he's out there getting rounds with Sam, with Dom Reyes, with a bunch of these guys up at Hendo's. He follows me around, travels with me, and visits all the gyms I visit, and I just see his growth. He's gonna be incredible. But it's like one of them things where you got 3 fights, man. I wish you'd have had 7, 8, 9, 10, and then really been polished and went pro, and it could have been whole other story. But he's coming up. I can't wait. You guys are definitely going to see him in the next couple of years or so if the world doesn't implode on us,
Yeah, no, 100%. That's assuming everything doesn't implode. And again, shout out to Nick and the rest of the crews at Endos, which, obviously you're training at Excel, right? And then, you're getting rounds, over at Team Quest, in Temecula. So how has that been in terms of your evolutionary process as a fighter to kind of learn under the auspices of, he's not there anymore, but Tom Galicchio, who's a jiu-jitsu
Yeah,
wizard, Smiling Sam Alvey, who's got a fight in not too far from now, and all the guys like Trevor Wells and David Lopez, and there's a litany of guys and girls that are at Hendo's. But how has that been going over there and enlisting Joe Stevenson, MMA legend, good
yeah,
friend, right?
but totally.
How has that been for your development?
It's been awesome. It showed me how to not just like that I needed that full skill set, the whole like Rodolfo Vieira thing. That was me at like a much, much, much more primitive level where I just had good wrestling and I might punch you once or twice until I can get into my grappling game. And they showed me you need to have it all. You need to be able to do everything. But more than that, they showed me like the professionalism. I saw the schedule where right when this was happening, I was kind of like running my own camp, doing my own thing when I fought Tyler Mead and Tyler Van Kill. Yeah, we call him that now. Tyler, who's a savage too, and he needs a fight as well. But me and this guy fought, and I remember after he beat me, he tapped me out with an arm triangle, and I remember on his post, his professor Barrett Yoshida was talking about. I was impressed by, and I can almost remember this paragraph word for word because this is literally what made me get my ass up and go to Hendo's, where he said, "I'm impressed with your composure in there. You stood tight. What could an amateur champion do to you when you're sparring with Herman Torado and you're sparring with other guys that are UFC and ADCC vets? What's he going to do to you? Your camp was perfect. Your boxing coaches did the right thing. Your MMA coaches, your jiu-jitsu coaches, et cetera, et cetera." And he's just like a thank you to everybody that helped him. And me on the weekend is like, well, which blue belts can I find to go wrestle so I can make sure that I'm ready for this fight? And that would be my camp. And it felt like what Cerrone was saying when he's like, I don't want to be the general. I want somebody to take care of that work and show me what to do and show me how to make weight and show me how to be professional so I can just worry about training. And I heard all that. And then I went up and found Hendo's and got beat up by Tom and did some cage stuff with Sam and learned some kickboxing with Tarek and just trying to get in there and step my game up and be with like-minded people that are also on this journey with me that have given up everything. Where when I'm at my jiu-jitsu gym, I love those guys to death. It's my home. I'm going to be there for the rest of my life teaching, but a lot of those guys have careers. They've been to college, they've worked on their careers, they have families, and then jiu-jitsu they go to as their hobby. For me, I've given up damn near everything and gone up to Hendo's, and Trevor's given up everything for this. All those guys have. We all busting our ass working, doing our best to just chase down this dream, and to be around a whole room full of guys that are walking that same path is really motivating. It makes you come in and train every day. It makes you want to push harder. Hearing Joe push us, the energy he brings to the gym is incredible. The practice he held last Wednesday, he just torched us. He was motivated. He did that to us. End of the year, he talked about 2020 might have been a shitty year for you. You might not have had a lot of say in what went down, but this last practice, this last year, you get the choice on how it ends. You're going to finish it the right way, and all that stuff motivates you. It makes you a better fighter, and I'm just thankful just to be around those people and get better around them, and see how far we can take this.
That's amazing. That's amazing. NWA Blood over on YouTube says Adam kills at every podcast. No, you do. Check out BCW Worldwide on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Shout out to you, good sir. Thank you for the kind words. No, but again, the level of competition, this is the craziness of it. There's no right or wrong way to do this thing that we call, mixed martial arts, right? You could be a specialist, right? You could be a specialist in striking or jiu-jitsu or a grappling art and do well and ascend to a championship level fighter, right? You could stay at your home gym, right? Stay at your home gym, have the same coaches forever, and ascend to world championship levels and calibers of fighter, right? Or you go and kind of sample everything and be like, it's like Costco, right? Like, oh, I don't want a full lemonade. Let me get a sample of the lemonade. And, oh, here's Wiener Schnitzel, whatever. And it's kind of like that. And, but there's no right or wrong way to do it. Everything helps.
Yeah, and from where we're at, it almost makes sense, man. this is such a dope MMA community. There's so many good, talented people, and it's Southern California, so they're everywhere. You know, it's one of those things where I want to just be in the middle of that. Like when the times I've gone to 10 Planet Oceanside and I roll with some of them, and then Gio blows my mind with some craziness that he's doing over there. I just rolled with my friend Brandon Walensky down at his gym, and he's a Clark Gracie black belt, and he's doing some of these crazy moves that I'm just picking up and sitting back and learning. And then I go up there at Hendo's, or I'm at Oceanside, or I'm, you know, Gracie Humida, or wherever I'm at, and you just soaking it up. And I feel like if you just stayed in one little gym like that, you'd be missing out on all that. And half the reason I do this is the people, you know, the people here are awesome. And I just want to be like immersed in that culture and have fun and become a better martial artist. So I'm definitely going to be sampling everything, you know?
That's no, absolutely. Which somebody that's getting love from everything that you're doing is Brandon Burke. It says you're the man, Djavan. There you go. 100. There
My
it
guy
is.
with over in
Now,
Excel, he's a beast.
tremendous, tremendous. Shout out to you, good sir. Now, obviously, in terms of what 2020 was supposed to be, right? In your mind's eye, looking down the barrel of like December 2019, going into 2020, what did I mean, assuming that world hadn't have shut down, what
Right.
was the course of action that you wanted to take in your 2020?
Dude, I've thought this over in my head a lot as well. It's been one of those lingering things where I plan my golden numbers fighting 4 times a year. If I can do more than that, so much the better. But I think to be a good active fighter, you got to get at least 3, 4 a year, and build from there. But my first one was Cage Wars, February 29th. Got out there, got it done, finished the guy. I was actually booked against Richie Miranda over in CSW.
CSW, yes. Who's
Yeah, we were going to
fighting?
fight at OC Fight Club, and man, I think that one got rescheduled 4 times. And whole time, I've been to CSW before years and years ago. I don't think I ever met Richie, but I trained one time. I went with Curtis Millender. I got beat up by Jacob Rosales. I went through their practice before, I think, my first AMI fight, maybe right after. It was around 2016 probably. But I know they run a good gym there. I know they work really tough. They have that thing called pressure test where they murder each other in there. And I'm just looking at this fight like this is going to be a war. This is going to test me, and got really excited to get up for that fight because I felt like Richie was one of those guys with his skill set where he's going to test every little bit that I got. And if I can walk out of that and win, then I have momentum and I'm going to keep building. And then I'm going to try to get LFA. I'm going to try to work down that pipeline, really get to the big show, get to Bellator. And my plan from there was if I had gotten through Richie is I wanted to go and fight at a higher promotion. And I wanted to build from there and make my 4 that way. And if he beat me up, I'd have gone down to Cage Wars and sharpened my skills again and work my way back up. But either way, it was going to be 4. And then my goal was by 2021 to be like right on the cusp of being in the UFC. And, I'm trying. We're still getting there. But I feel like the Richie one was a tease because it happened. And then I think it got rescheduled for July. And then no fights were happening in July. Got rescheduled for November. No fights were happening in November. And then they finally was just like, fuck it, man. Maybe we'll see each other again one day.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned Richie, and CSW because that Richie is one of those ones where I mean he as well as Nick Matea, there's a bunch of guys and girls over at CSW that their entire amateur team has to go pro out of necessity. And Richie's fighting for Dynasty Combat Sports in Nebraska. I want to say this weekend. Yeah, absolutely. But it's funny because it's on. I think it's going to be on Fight TV. If you've got the Fight app, I love that app. There's so many MMA, pro wrestling, everything on there. So I mean, it is there for purchase, and it's kind of funny. It's kind of funny because he grew up here in SoCal, but went out to Nebraska for school. So to make his debut in Nebraska in the same town that he went to college in, it's kind of a fun. It's a fun one.
That's how you do it, man. Midwest is jumping right now. That's where I'm looking to. Montana, Idaho, Nebraska, Arizona, somewhere over there got something, and I think that's got to be the next move. That's got to be what we got to do until California decides to open up again.
Yeah, and I mean, even California opening up, I mean, it hasn't been the safest, So there's a lot of things that need to happen. When I look at it, right, like like the Comedy Store, right? They're saying they were saying last year, summer of last year, and this is one of the things that prompted Joe Rogan to move, was like the Comedy Store, which maybe holds 1,000 people, maybe, right, in the entire like 3 or 4 rooms in it. Well, that wasn't going to open up until 2022.
Oh
So
God.
not even this year, next year. And they were saying that in summer of last year. So for me, I'm like, oh man, that seems like it's going to get bleak for all of the regional amateur and pro shows, because there
Sounds like
have been fights, right? There, like Golden Boy, there, all of the boxing fights, but all of those companies that have ran California during the pandemic have a huge like marketing and production budget that they can facilitate running out like LA Live for a night and just doing it whatever, because they've got a lucrative TV deal. But when you're like Lights Out Extreme Fighting, when you're Epic, when you're
Kenny
Star
Tracy's
Star, when you
tickets, man.
yeah,
That's the killer.
yeah,
It hurts, man. It
which
hurts, but it does give us time to kind of cultivate our other resources, and figure out, like you said, what's that exit plan? Because imagine that, just go through this pandemic never happens and just putting your nose to the grind till your body breaks down. And now I'm 34, 35 and put everything into fighting. And now I'm sitting there like, oh, it's over, separated shoulder or whatever caused it. But, at least now I've had this sit down time to be like, what's the next phase of my life look like? What am I going to be doing from here? So I'm not a bum on the street when I get done fighting, basically.
yeah, which I gotta ask, obviously, you've already ascended to pro, so do you have any interesting matchups that you're kind of like, oh, this matchup, whether it be regional in the LFA, have you been scouting the scene and seeing what's out there?
Oh, honestly, dude, I've been wanting to like fight outside of California the most because I've kind of developed so many cool relationships with the guys here. I want to keep those options open. I want to actually be able to train at a few of these guys' gyms to get better and collaborate. And so I kind of almost want it to be like California versus everybody else, and go to Arizona and fight, go to Mexico and fight, go to Florida, go fight, go to Tennessee, and not only do that, but start to build up a fan base in other places too, where other people start to know my name and see what I can do and start to kind of, build to that business that I want to make in the future. But yeah, nothing off the top of my mind, but it's like, man, if you throw me a fight, I'll take it at this point. I damn near don't care who it is. I'm just trying to get back out there and go do my thing again.
And it's kind of weird, right? Where, places that are less populated have been able to kind of open up a little bit more, right? And have fights. The last couple of UFC fights, they've actually had fans in attendance. There's a lot of regional shows that, yeah, there's a lot of regional shows that are opening up, that you can find on like UFC Fight Pass or Fight TV, and they're like, oh, it's a limited capacity, but it's still,
It's still
it's
running.
still 300 people. Yeah,
Yeah, I saw CFFC was running out of Philly for like back-to-back events for like the last couple of months. South Dakota and Kansas and all them have been doing LFA. It's like they're making it happen. It's just California being dumb. That's all. But where there's a will, there's a way. I feel like now
yeah.
it's just on us to be proactive and go hit these guys up and, hey, do you guys need a fighter? Hey, you need somebody to make 170 or 155 for you, and really just put yourself out there, because I feel like I'm kind of getting the idea that if you just sit here and keep training and training, nobody's going to be kicking down your door to ask you for a fight. You might need to go and call out a few people and see
No,
if they need your services.
no, 100%. I mean, just look at it here. So Tyson Duckworth, who is the reigning and defending Alaskan Fighting Championship featherweight champion, right? So the 145 champion for a credible and legitimate, incredible organization out of Alaska. Well, literally, he fought February 2020,
Yeah.
right? Like the end of February 2020 in a region of Alaska that's different from where he calls home, right? And then he flew back in, and then literally the world shut down after it, right?
Brutal.
Well, he got a fight. Guess where it is? Now he lives in Alaska. So where would you think you got to fight it?
Gotta think somewhere in the Midwest, right?
Georgia,
No shit.
which geographically is literally like, I mean, you couldn't get any more south
Yeah,
from
it's a long
Alaska
flight.
than Florida. Yeah, but that's kind of what you kind of have to do is kind of put yourself out there and see what opportunities may present itself, and you never know that one of those doors that you knock might invite you in.
We're hoping, man. And, you know, that fails, I got to back up doing jiu-jitsu, man. Still want to win worlds. Still want to win ADCC also, and hopefully be grinding towards that alongside my MMA goals. So, make one or the other happen or go to school for it.
Yeah. So in terms of, because IBJJF, the International Brazilian Jiu Jitsu Federation, that got, I mean, they pretty much canceled all of the shows right around the time, well, right after the NBA kind of shut down and everything. So in terms of being a jiu-jitsu practitioner and black belt, right? And I mean, that's going to be like the top of the food chain in terms of
Oh yeah.
tournaments and a competition. But what kind of stands out to you? Even if you can't do a worlds or whatever, would you do like a fight to win or
Well,
something
definitely.
of that? Okay.
I've done fight to win before. Their shows are dope. Every single time I've been to one, it's been awesome. The whole routine of MMA fights where you do check in a certain amount of time and then you got your stuck back there and then you sit till you get your hands wrapped and then you sit till you fight more or less. And it can be a 4 or 5 hour process, especially if you deepen the card. Seth Daniels, the owner of Fight to Win, he's like, yo, show up an hour before your fight just to make sure you there, stretch, and then walk out and go do it. And man, it was the chillest show I ever did. Hard 6 minutes, got after it. Uh, Lost to JJ Wilson, who's a beast, but fucking the show was amazing. The lights were amazing. Everybody seemed like they were having a party, dude. I'd be stoked to do Fight to Win again. That show was a blast, and it's great exposure. It's on Flow Grappling. Everybody's checking you out, and obviously the competition is going to be high, so that's way up there on my list if I get the shot to do it.
And in addition, and shout out to Fight to Win, that is incredible. But um, I mean, with as somebody that competes as a mixed martial artist as well as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, would you do combat Jiu-Jitsu?
Oh yeah, in a heartbeat, man. I'm a short step away from doing bare knuckle. Just let me go fight somebody somehow, some way, dude. I want to get out there. I'm not gonna do bare knuckle. I will not do it. But I'm just saying, like, combat jits, MMA, damn, boxing, even shit, man. I would do something. I'm just trying to stay active, trying to get out there. I almost don't even care what the medium is. I consider myself a martial artist, so I'd like to be able to hold up in any field you put in front of me.
No, 100%. Now, you are a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and the path to get that, I mean, again, that's the top echelon of your experience. Now, obviously, you can become coral belt and everything like that, but that's pretty much like, if you're
Yeah.
a white belt looking in, that's what is the some experience of your journey to black and now achieving it and what that black belt means to you. What does it mean?
Oh man, it's really big for me. It's one of those things where they say like the belt doesn't matter that much, and in a big way it doesn't. Your skills still have to do what your skills do for you, but it's big because I feel like a psychological upgrade when I got my black belt at the end of December, and I've rolled a lot since then, and you feel more confident. You feel like, man, I'm a black belt now. I gotta represent this. I feel like there's a different authority in my techniques and the way I execute it, and I really like it. But the progression's been nuts, man. I think I was a white belt for like 4 or 5 years because I couldn't stick to a gym. I hopped around when I spent my time in Virginia. I wasn't that serious. I didn't take it, like put my all into it. And so when I moved to California, I went from a white to black in about 5 years. Oh shit. And basically, it's a maturing process. It took a long time for me to get to this point and just try to like grind and keep on pushing. But hold on one sec.